stakeholder input, comparative analysis, and dialogue with the Economic Development Department. Economy is one of the 5 pillars on Council's 2017 to 2021 strategic plan. The Economic Development Strategic Plan comprises and provides direction to achieve viability, growth, and development that simultaneously improve quality of life and the environment. The Economic Development Strategic Plan was built on these 5 pillars. Number 1, land division for economic development. Number 2, business attraction. Number 3, business retention and expansion. Number 4, tourism, destination marketing and hosting events. And 5, development or business development and diversification. Through the Economic Development Strategic Planning session in June and October 2018, 19 stakeholder interviews in June and July 2018, and June to September 2018 research and in-depth comparative analysis examining business costs, livability, and other economic resources that the Economic Development Strategic Plan was drafted. The process comprised the needed direction, building upon the 2015-2017 strategic plan to support administration and future operation plan. A couple options for Council to consider this morning is that Council recommend the draft Lloydminster Economic Development Strategic Plan to the Council for decision, and that committee request future revision to the draft Lloydminster Economic Development Strategic Plan, and that I go to a future Council meeting for decision. That Council committee recommend changes to the draft Lloydminster Economic Development Strategic Plan, and that plan come back to the committee for review, and that the committee request more information. Governance implications. The strategic plan and affected documents are intended to serve as a guide in all decisions and actions of Council and administration in relation to economic development. Strategic priorities may be adjusted annually to reflect new and emerging economic and community needs. Budget implications. The mission, vision, values, and key priorities defined in economic development strategic plan will guide the formulation and annual business plans and will guide future discussions with Council and administration. And I'll pass it back to you, Worship, if you have any questions. And I know there are copies of the draft plan in front of you. As discussed, Kaplan wanted to be here today, and if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer those. What I can answer, I will take back and get Council or Kaplan to provide feedback if needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Manager Stain. Comments, questions from Council members? Council Dutch.
Thank you, Worship. First off, again, thank you to Donna and staff at Academy for putting this document together, and I know the input gathered through the studies plays a critical role in it. I think the 2 questions for me. One, and we talked about this when we did an overview last week on this, but certainly the sovereign pictures and it will create more of an opportunity for prospective investors to see that this is a place where they can see themselves and visualize their businesses being here, sort of creating a windows sort of metaphor for folks to look at. Some of the pictures I'm not sure entirely make sense in there, and so that's my personal opinion. Certainly one of the things that I would recommend is the picture we have, an aerial photo of the city that sort of gives a one kind of view of the city from the air that I think would fit very well in this document. Now the second part, and I'm not clear on, maybe we talked about it, but I guess would be is, our plans relative to the distribution of the document, where we might use it, and our plans on sort of taking it forward, because there are a lot of pieces in there that are, I think, very valuable. And the second part is how do we get this information out to people who can see it here. There's actually a third part, I think, which is sort of in here, and I know we've talked a bit about it. And some of it's through the review with the city manager, but it's around how we as a city are focused on service delivery and quality service delivery. And I think some of that is in here as well, but somehow along the way, as part of the message, we want to make sure that it's the view within our context is that you can get quality service. We're here to help, we're here to assist you, and we're here to make your journey as a new investor and a new owner of a business within the community, one that's easy and well supported. And I think it's sort of implied, but might be worth adding in there. I'm not sure what that would look like. But otherwise, I like it. I think it's a great step.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. We had discussed some of the concerns that you brought forward, and we are in the process of revising the document. We didn't have enough time to get the revisions for this draft, which is why we're presenting it as it is. When we do bring it back to council for adoption, we will have the finalized document that has all your comments that we received at the last session should be implemented, and you'll have the opportunity to review that as well.
Perfect, thank you very much.
Other comments, questions? Councilors?
Yeah, sure. Just thank you, Your Worship. No, I just, as far as the document goes, I think it, for the most part, the content within it covers off all of the bases that as a strategic plan we as a council wanted to address. So everything that's in it, I think, kind of nails it in terms of the individual strategies, even breaks it down to kind of a granular level of the goals we want to accomplish. And then I think when an outsider is reading this and seeing maybe some of the business-friendly type of approaches and things like that that are within there, I think that this document itself could lend itself to doing us a lot of favors, especially when there's kind of an electronic version of it on our website as well, where someone from anywhere who wants to potentially do business in Lloydminster can have access to all this information, at their hands. So, as far as I can see, everything is great, other than a handful of revisions that were, suggested, small grammatical type things, but I'm sure those will be fixed up for the official copy, and looking forward to seeing it at a council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Council.
I guess I would add, from my perspective, I think this, the 5 pillars fit very well with the 3-legged stool that's been talked about in the business community from my perspective and other people in economic development, business attraction, tourism, and retaining and supporting the businesses that we have. Added to that is the land division, which is required, and we work both publicly and with private developers in the community and surrounding to enhance business development and opportunities for those new businesses. And I guess we broke it out from business retention and expansion to business development and diversification. I think those are good covers that way that add to that, because the responsibility of economic development is a lot of things. To improve the businesses that we have today, we know it's a lot easier to grow a business than to start a brand new business. So I hope that with the direction that we've got through our consultant, working with the business community, from council's input and administration, we have the ability to present 2 people that are interested at our community from a brand new investment perspective, but as well as enhancing the business that they have today and adding to the investment. And I think that speaks to great volumes of where we want to go, because without the economic driver in this community, we'll have just what we have today, and we want to continue to enhance that. So I think this is a great document. Again, hats off to Catlin and the administration team, working with our consultant. Again, I think we saw some good value come from that brought us together and pulled that information together. I think the consultant was able to get input from the community that we may not have been able to get. And I think that's important to realize, that value comes from that consultant asking some hard questions and getting some hard answers from people. It gives us a better understanding of where we need to be as a city, as well as from the administration's perspective to move things forward. So I thank everyone that contributed, the 19 and so people that or groups that were involved, a lot of input, and I think that was muchly appreciated as well. So thank you for the hard efforts.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Any other comments?
Just one question, and it's mostly my ignorance of this one. When we look at the distribution, are there touch points throughout Alberta or other places around Canada where this document should reside, or make them aware of, or how do we get to be on their website, or those kind of things? And that's kind of a piece where I'm thinking about A, the document's phenomenal, B, how do I make sure that someone gets to read it? So if there are people that are already interested in coming here, terrific. But if there are people not even aware that this might be an option, how do we get to that next layer in? So each layer out, trying to find a way to get in. So I'll leave that to you and Kat maybe to explore.
Yeah, my understanding is there's lots of avenues for us to use to get the document out there.
Okay.
But I will get Kaplan to bring that information back at our next, when we bring it back to council for consideration.
Thank you.
No further questions. Council Baker.
Thank you. I don't put a comment in here. As the Chamber of Commerce had an opportunity to look at this plan.
But they first time anybody outside administration or council would see this draft document.
I guess, to me, it would be important that they're on side with the direction of this report.
I can certainly help carry that message tomorrow to the Chamber of Commerce. So I believe I have a Chamber of Commerce meeting tomorrow afternoon of the Board of Directors. So it would be, now that we have received the draft, I'd be more than glad to share it with them and get some input from them. But as Executive Manager Stang did say, I believe representatives from the Chamber were involved in the input, but they haven't, being the first public viewing of this document, will ensure that they get a chance to take a look at it and give us some input.
I know Kaplan does meet with the Chamber quite often, and they very well may be in tune with the document. I can't answer that for sure, but I know they have had input into creating the document. And like I said, this is the first time it's coming public for anybody outside of council and administration.
Any other questions, comments? Not seeing any. I think that the direction, basically, the general feeling around the table here would be that I think that this would be ready to come to council, Executive Manager Stang, but I guess the question is, would it be when the final draft is ready to be released? Is that then we'd shoot for that?
Yes, I'll get a date. I think she has some dates in mind that she'd like to bring it back for adoption, but I will confirm that with her, and we will make sure it's on the agenda in the future.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item number 5.3, City Manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 5.3 FCSS 2017 annual report, I'll ask Patrick Lancaster to come forward to present.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, Council.
Good morning, Patrick.
I'm very excited to be here today to talk about the FCSS annual report. This has been a document a long time coming, particularly this year. The reason we put together the report, we had three objectives in mind. We were asked to share with the public some of the good works that a lot of the nonprofits in our community are doing with funding that they receive from the City of Lloydminster. We wanted to make sure that the public were more aware of these services so that they could access them and take part in them. And we wanted to provide some transparency in where is the money from our department and from the city grant programs goes when it's going out into the community. Between FCSS, Ask Lotteries, Transportation Assistance for Persons with Disabilities Grant and Smoking Tobacco Grant, the City of Lloydminster puts out about $500,000 every year into the community directly to nonprofits. And it's important that folks understand how that money is being used, what kind of programs it's going to, and maybe a little bit more information. When we do the recommendations from our grant committees and bring them to council, there's not a lot of information that talks about what exactly are these programs that are being funded. It's got the names of the organization's got the program, but a little bit more about what's going on and a little bit more about the outcomes that these groups are providing is important to get a better understanding of how that investment is impacting the community. The report is also timely. It coincides with, this is the 50th anniversary of the FCSS program operating in Lloydminster. Previously, it would have been under the preventative social programs label, I guess, what it was called in the past. But this year represents 50 years since Lloydminster first started participating with the province of Alberta in the program. Back then it was part of a regional FCSS program with the county of Vermilion River and the at the time town of Vermilion. A question that has come up is, so this is the 2017 annual report. We're almost out of 2018, so why is it so late in the year? We did have some challenges in putting together this report for about 2017. The main challenge came down to time. 2018 proved to be a very busy year for our department, with lots of new initiatives, lots of new projects, lots of new workshops, and the time it took for us to put together a report after receiving all the data back in from our nonprofits did put us a little bit later in the year. It also required a little extra time for us to develop a template that struck a good balance between talking about what the programs do and what has actually been accomplished in 2017 and not flooding everyone with lots of data, which I have to give kudos to our communications department. I tend to want to put a little too much into my reports, and they helped us to find a good balance of something that people would actually read. So the report itself, I won't go through every aspect of it, but it essentially gives a bit of an outline of what are some of the direct city partnership programs and services that have taken place over 2017. A couple that I did want to highlight is the Citizenship Ceremony that took place in October of last year. This was the first time in 17 years that Lloydminster hosted a joint provincial citizenship ceremony. This was done in partnership with Catholic Social Services, and we saw over 100 new Canadians gain their citizenship that day. Several of you I see from the room today were in attendance of that. Our information and referral calls were up significantly in 2017. This is part of a growing trend. We believe some of this has to do with some of the economic downturn, but more so we believe it has to do with the fact that residents are becoming more aware of our services and calling upon us when they need to get connected to different services within the community. Around page 14 is where the real meat of the report is. So this is an outline of all the programs and services operated by the city, as well as all the programs that are funded through our different grant streams. We have all of the programs listed under the Family Community Support Services are either funded entirely through FCSS funding, or the administration portion is covered by FCSS, and some of those funds might come from a different city budget line. And the example I use specifically is the senior taxi program. The funding from that does not come directly from FCSS, it comes from another budget line, but the program is entirely administered by our FCSS staff. So it outlines the FCSS grants, the SAS Lottery grants, the Lloydminster Tobacco Reduction Grant. These are all done in open calls for applications, which nonprofit groups can apply for and then are adjudicated by committee. FCSS and SAS Lotteries are currently adjudicated by the FCSS Advisory Committee. The Lloydminster Tobacco Reduction Grant is adjudicated by an internal committee of city administration. All recommendations from these committees go to council for approval. And the Saskatchewan Transit Assistance for Persons with Disabilities Grant, right now the only organization that would be eligible to receive funding through that is Border City Connects. And what we do with that is we apply for the grant on their behalf. We apply for the grant and then we transfer the funds over to them, and they assist us with submitting a final report to them. So that, in a nutshell, is the report. It's our hope to share this report with the community so that they can be better informed about the programs and services that are offered by the City of Lloydminster, and more informed about how those dollars are being spent. Any questions?
Any questions? Councilor Parsons?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to first start out by saying I wouldn't get hung up on how long it took to get this out, because I think the document itself is pretty fantastic. So any extra time you took ended up being a pretty great product. So I'd give you a shout out for that in the first place. Looks like you guys did a lot of work and it looks really good, other than maybe a picture on page 2 that's, you know, questionable. It's got some guy with glasses in there and he looks like an odd character. Other than that, my question was just on, so what's the follow-up with some of this? So you look at several of these programs and, you know, dollars spent per activity. Is there kind of a post-mortem that happens on these things to say, okay, you know, for some of the ones that were maybe under-attended for what kind of the amount of dollars allocated to it, is there something that we should be doing differently to try and get better attendance or something along those lines? And I don't know whether the dollar amount per person is right or wrong, or how much it costs for some of these things, a perfect number, but the one that stood out to me and it just jumped off the page. And there's probably other ones that I just didn't jump off the page, but it was Big Brothers Big Sisters, $50,000 for 7 individuals once a week. And maybe that is the right number based on, maybe you're paying the wage of one person for a year, and 7 is kind of the max they can deal with. I don't know. I'm just wondering, is there an activity that happens with these programs to say which ones worked, which ones didn't, which ones can we improve on to get more people out?
I'm glad you asked. That's a very good question. So Big Brothers Big Sisters actually is a good example to draw upon. This was identified by the advisory committee at the last allocation meeting, which would have been for special projects, or not the last one, but at a special projects allocation meeting last earlier in 2018. And a conversation was had with Big Brothers Big Sisters about how the funding is invested in their staff, and how that ends up getting represented in the reporting that they give back to us. And we determined it would probably be better if they basically combined their different programs into a single ask, and that's actually what they did for us this time around, because the funding that goes into the staff doesn't necessarily reflect the full amount of service that we're getting out of them. Because that staff person, while they're supporting that program, they're also doing other things which would be eligible or fit within the realm of our FCSS. And so there was a bit of a follow-up piece there. There are other corrections that have to happen with other programs, and I'll draw your attention perhaps to the mental health training that took place in 2017. This was an example of a program where we delivered a very high quality workshop on mental health, and had a great group of special speakers at the event. Our attendance was low. I think we were at about say 30 pathways to mental health, 26 attendance. While it was an excellent workshop and it was very well good information for everyone who attended, that wasn't our goal for that event. So going forward into the next term, because this was an internal one, we were able to reconfigure how we did the program in the following year. It was done entirely in partnership with different mental health serving agencies, and we were able to bring the costs down significantly and bring our attendance numbers up. We almost tripled them for the next time around. So when we look at how these programs deliver and how the outcome reports come out, when they don't live up to our expectations, we kind of go back and have to ask, okay, what can we do better the next time around? And the advisory committee does a very similar process when allocating funds out. When a report comes back to them and they're not satisfied with the results, then they, through me, send messaging to the organizations on how can we deliver a better outcome for the next application period.
Thank you very much. That's a perfect answer, and that's really what's important to me is that these reports are good because they are truly a transparent view of what's going on within the program, and kind of seeing that extra layer of what happens afterwards and kind of a follow-up, because at the end of the day some portion of this is, well, it's all tax dollars one way or another, maybe Alberta government matching or it's City will administer tax dollars, but it's still tax dollars at the end of the day. But it's important that we demonstrate where it went, and even if it wasn't the ideal attendance, if we can recognize that and we know that, and we know we can make steps to make it better or improve the programs, and that's really what's important. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
I was just going to add one more thing. This is looking at the mental health component, and in my other life at the college, I'm working on a regional post-secondary mental health strategy, which does incorporate both the schools and all the agencies within the community. So there may be opportunities where some of the dollars that comes through that grant can offset some of these costs. So I just made a note of it for myself with the partners, and it might then free up some dollars for other people that are asking for funds as well. And this one right now, with the extension I'm going to be sending it, will take us into 2020 or 2021. And there's a fair amount of change, a little over $100,000 a year that is to be spent in a college post-secondary strategy, but it's intended to be regional. So I can see some ways where it can hook in particular. I think the Health Foundation supported the mental health program for 3,500 youth, or pardon me, 1,100 youth, whatever it was. But there's opportunities where just by having those meetings, I think we can free up some dollars for you and still maybe even achieve more through this grant as well. So
Excellent.
Councillor, thank you.
Yeah, very well, report very well done. Your whole department, I think, does a very good job and really puts in a lot of effort to help out the charities. And I think that they've done a wonderful job over the last couple of years of getting this all organized and being a conduit for the charities. So from a charitable side of things, I think we're very fortunate to have you there. There was a fundraising function put on just a few months ago, and it had a really good response from a number of different charities that were there. I had the privilege of attending it, and it was very well done, and it's it's just a great asset to have access to those events. So job well done, and certainly keep continuing the work.
I'd like to chime in if I may. This is a great presentation, Patrick. Thank you very much. Because it gives us not just, people often think of the Alberta government supporting FCSS and the taxpayers of the city, but seeing the Saskatchewan lottery money laid out in front of us, the tobacco reduction grant money, as well as the Saskatchewan Transit, it puts it all in one document. I think that's very important as a community, because we are that bi-provincial nature. There are contributing factors and support from both sides of the border. And at the end of the day, you put it all together. Kudos as well to you and your team, and the team that supports you, that you put together a lot of programs with a very small contingent of city staff. You rely a lot on partnerships, and you demonstrate that very well in your group and your department. You work with just about everybody in the community. I don't think there's anyone that you don't touch. So that's, again, hats off to you and your team for that, because you show the city is truly one team, one player at this table with a whole bunch of other people, and I really appreciate that very much from my perspective. So thank you. Any other comments? Well, thank you very much, Patrick. I look forward to getting this spread in the community. Moving on to the next agenda item, I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship. To present 2019 Council and Committee meeting schedule, I'll turn it over to the City Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship, Council. The item I have before you is to provide the committee with a draft 2019 meeting schedule for review and feedback. Procedure bylaw requires City Council to establish the schedules for the upcoming year's council meetings before December 31st of each year. Amendments to the meeting schedule can be done by resolution at any future meeting. Administration is providing a draft schedule for the committee's review and to gather feedback. Required changes to the schedule will be incorporated into the final 2019 meeting schedule that will be presented at a future council meeting. The options that council has is the committee instructing administration to bring forward the 2019 draft meeting schedule forward to council as it exists, or that the council instructs administration to make the amendments to the draft. The governance implications are that the approval of the 2019 meeting schedule must occur prior to December 31st, so it's in alignment with the procedure bylaw. To you, Your Worship, for questions and comments.
Thank you, City Clerk. Councillor Buckingham.
Thank you, Worship. Looked fairly consistent to me. The only concern I had was council meeting scheduled for April 22nd, which in fact is Easter Monday. I know with schedules and kids at a school and different things like that, I wondered if we couldn't potentially move that one to the 29th of April from the 22nd.
I know this is one of the discussions, and as people look at calendars, check, that's certainly a possibility. I had looked at May, the next month, and just wondered if, because of the long weekend in May, if we should create a little bit more opening at the beginning of May, and that would kind of fit with what you're suggesting, is moving the GPC to the 21st, Tuesday the 21st, and moving the first council meeting in May to the 13th. But that was one area that I looked at and was otherwise pretty good with. And then in December of 2019, proposing that we move the GPC to the 2nd and a council meeting on the 9th, and potentially, if it was required, on the 16th, to deal with outstanding issues before Christmas, because it's challenging when we move into that time frame, and depending on when Christmas falls, it can lead to a very short week before, or the week, a very short week leading into Christmas. So It's just, I'd rather have enough meetings than not enough meetings and then have to create them. Any other thoughts, Councilor Duchek? You had a chance to look at your calendar?
Just a mess.
It's a mess, well, I appreciate it. I appreciate that other job, getting it away with it.
You know what, December 2019, I think, you know, if we moved it up, both of those meetings up by a week, that would be, I think that would be a smart move, because you have your Christmas parties and a whole bunch of other demands on our time that we're expected to be out and about, and leaving it later is not good. The other part as well is that I think from administrative standpoint, there's probably other things that they're tending to as well, and letting them have a bit of breather space in the last part of December before they head out on break is probably a good idea as well. I think that would be appreciated.
Councilor Forrest?
Thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to say, the December one is really the only one that I agree with, you know, for sure that we should think about moving that up, and mostly from a budget perspective, it's always better to have those extra budget meetings scheduled earlier than later. And as far as May, I wouldn't touch that one, or I wouldn't touch May, April for similar reasons, because you've got levies that are due around that time that I wouldn't play around with those too much, because the earlier we can get them, the better. So I wouldn't move any meetings around too much, because then you run risk of not having your levy figured out early enough. So.
Councilor Baker?
Thank you. Thank you. Somewhere in our discussions, we've talked about customer service. And many of these things that come to council serve the community. So when you get too big of gaps in the meeting schedule, it drags some of these events on, whether it be building permits, development permits, those kinds of things. And I think that, and I know that the city, for the most part, has always been cognizant of these issues. And you can always have a special council meeting rather than hold up a developer or those kind of things. So this is about serving the customer, not serving city council. And we can adjust. If we have to have two meetings close together to deal with business, we should do that and then take a break. But the main thing is that we look after people who want to do business in our city. We just handed out a document here called Economic Development and Serving the Needs of the Developer. And so I hope we keep that in mind. And I'm sure you do.
Thanks, Councilor Baker, and I think that absolutely that we haven't had a great deal of need for special meetings, but certainly that the call would be dealt with accordingly. Absolutely, I think that from a business standpoint, this is our first round, and certainly if something comes up that needs significant, that needs the city council to deal with, council's prepared to do that, and we do have that opportunity through the to give notice and let people know that we are meeting and doing it in the public format outside the scheduled dates if something does come up. So, indeed, this is our intention was to get the basic standard ones out of the way, as I call it standard, and to stay in a regular format as best as we can. Any other thoughts?
I guess just the April 22nd, that Easter Monday, and moved it to the Tuesday, April 23rd. I'm not sure what people's plans are, but typically if people are taking a day off, they'll tag that extra Monday on if it's not a staff for them and visit family or whatever. So I'm just trying to think of our staff as well here. So if we were to look at that and move it to Tuesday, that would at least allow our folks to have that 4-day weekend. So I'd recommend that.
Or even, if I may, if the guy moved it back and went 1/8/15 instead of 8/15/23 in April, to get it out of that week completely, just another option, right?
That's true. The only concern I could see raising is that we'd leave quite a gap if we moved it up 1 full week, then we'd go to 22nd, then maybe we'd leave May alone. It would either be one or the other, because I don't think we want to leave more than a 2-week gap is what we've had in that arrangement for at least having a business meeting of council is basically 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks we meet. So if we were to move it up, then I would withdraw my recommendation in May and just make that April open. if that was what Council so wished, but I heard what Council Torson said, and I will look to maybe the city manager through to taxation. I know we have to have a meeting, there's a time, and I believe it's at the end of April to get the notices out.
First reading.
Yeah, the first.
In 2018, we passed the human rights on the 7th of May, so that date is an important date.
Yeah.
If council could take an opportunity to review this and provide their feedback as quickly as they could to legislative services or through the city manager, then we can sort of harden up those dates. I do remind council that if for whatever reason something changes, council has the ability to change the meeting dates by resolution.
Council Baker.
The mayor, Worship, I think administration should set the must-have dates, put them in the schedule, and that's the way they're gonna be. If you miss a meeting, you miss a meeting. But I can't sit here and look at this and determine which is the most important date to the administration group. But I think that what you were just saying, if there are important dates, like you were talking, Councilor Jonathan, then you have a meeting, and if someone has to miss a meeting, so be it, but I just don't want to sit at my desk trying to figure out what's right for you guys when I don't even know for sure what those dates should be.
And that's a good point, Council Baker, and I think Council Torson alluded to that. There are some dates that we have worked around our convention schedule, as you can see down there. But you're right, there are dates that have some strategic business matters that have to be dealt with from the city and basically legislative. So I think that with that in mind, we'll send it back to the city clerk and just ensure if those dates can be, I don't know, just identified in an email to council members and we can comment accordingly that way. But I think that's good to tighten up May a little bit, as an example. April's got a little bit of movement. I think that's in December is what I'm hearing. Council Torson.
Thank you, Your Worship. You have to confirm with finance on this as well, but April doesn't necessarily have as much movement with approval of financial statements, or maybe that's March, but either way, we should, I think it'd be nice even if we just had like, you know, crossed lines through the ones that are like non-movable.
Yep. And
then after that, we can take a look at what we think would work better with schedules and whatnot. Thank you.
Sure. Enough direction there?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, City Clerk. Because it's always, we appreciate everyone's feedback on that because we do have to meet, it is a requirement, and try to schedule as best as we can, allowing for family and certain matters that come into play. And as you said, Council Baker, this council will meet when it's scheduled, and no matter who's sitting in this chair or whatever chairs are sitting around the council, so from that perspective. Moving on to item 6, governance and priorities. I'll look to the city manager.
Thank you, Worship, to present 6.1 manufactured homes bylaw. I'll ask Scott Brady to come forward.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Scott.
The subject matter for this information report is manufactured homes bylaw. Administration is bringing forward a new bylaw to bring the assessment taxation of manufactured homes into alignment with the Lloydminster Charter. Some background, the City of Lloydminster currently has a trailer courts bylaw from 1968 covering the assessment and taxation of manufactured homes located within manufactured homes parks. This bylaw was updated in 1980 and again in 2014 to update the fees, but no other updates have been made. The current bylaw does not meet all the requirements of the Lloydminster Charter, including the requirement to assess each individual manufactured home. Currently, the City of Lloydminster charges a daily fee of $2 per day per occupied manufactured home. The manufactured home park owner collects these fees from the owners, but the manufactured homes are remitted to the city on a monthly basis. However, there has been some issues with collection under the current bylaw. Under the new bylaw, the individual manufactured homes will be assessed, and there will be a minimum tax applied to each manufactured home as part of the property tax bylaw in accordance with Section 308 of the Lloydminster Charter. This tax will be levied to the owner of the manufactured home park each year, along with their annual tax notice for the land. This tax will be due at the same time as regular property taxes, and penalties will apply in the same manner as the land taxes. The objective is to replace the existing trailer court bylaw with a new bylaw that aligns with the requirements of the Lloydminster Charter and provides additional means of enforcement for non-compliance with the payment of fees outlined in the bylaw. For budget, the collection of the property taxes for manufactured homes is budgeted for annually. The new bylaw should ensure collection of these fees are more seamless. Administration does not expect the cost of manufactured homeowners unless there are substantial increases to the assessed values of manufactured homes. The minimum tax will be equal to or less than the $2 per day currently being charged. I'll pass back to you.
Thank you, Scott. Questions or comments? Councillor Thorson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So to be clear on this one, the goal here is to basically collect the same fees as we otherwise would have been collecting from the individual manufactured homes, but rather than going through, we'll say, a middleman, which is a park owner, we're going directly to the residents or homeowners of the trailers?
In this situation right now, we're trying to get rid of the fee structure. The city of Lloydminster is the only municipality in Alberta that can charge a fee because of the charter. However, we haven't got the properties assessed, so we're not currently meeting the criteria of the charter. So what we're suggesting here is that we actually, how it's currently done is that we assess the land to the property owners, and that will remain in place to the trailer park owners. So we are suggesting that when we assess the properties, we assess the owner of the park as the owner of the mobile homes. They will be responsible to pay all taxes, and they will collect it the same as they're doing now through the property, through the rent rolls.
Okay. So it actually is the opposite of what I just said.
Yes.
Okay.
It's basically the same structure they're doing now. Instead of a fee, we'll be doing it through the property tax.
Okay.
Because they currently collect all fees from the trailers, and then they pay it to us.
What do you mean by fees? Like
So the $2
stormwater, those
It's a
type-
$2 per day fee
Okay.
that replaces property taxes for trailers under this old bylaw.
Okay.
They collect those fees from all trailer park owners to the owners of the trailers, and they would remit that to the city.
Okay. Is this our first venture into minimum taxes?
Yes.
Because I know that that's a tool that's available, generally for other communities through municipal government acts and things like that, but I don't think we've done minimum taxes in the past. Is that right?
That's correct. We don't have any minimum tax in place now. As I said, my concern is with the assessed values of those trailers will come in at, and we will actually see a loss in revenue that we have to put on other property classes. So I want to make sure that by doing a minimum tax, we're collecting the same as we are currently collecting.
Okay. I'll have to ponder that, whether or not it's the right thing to do or not is to do a minimum tax. But just from my perspective is whether or not the right thing is to say an arbitrary floor rather than focusing on assessed value the way it is for everyone else. I don't know what the answer is, and maybe this is the right approach. But you're not doing the assessments on the trailers in this scenario because you're doing this minimum tax, correct?
They'll still be assessed.
But on the land value.
Well, the land value will be assessed individually, still as a vacant property to the trailer park owner. Each mobile home will be assessed. It has to be under the charter. That's the main purpose of changing this, is that we need those assessments done. So they'll be assessed. It's just that the value of those properties will be so low that there'll be no real taxes collected.
Okay, thank you.
So I think I got the answer. The question answered by you, Scott, that Councilor Torres put forward. But so this is really going to not affect leased, because there'll be some confusion, I'm sure, about leased. Some trailers sit on deeded land, I believe, and some trailers sit on leased land through the trailer park. So, unless it goes to the land, whoever owns the land is where this is going to end up, correct?
This bylaw only affects mobile home parks, the parks that are designated in the city as mobile home parks. If there's a trailer on an individual's property, it's assessed the same as a residential structure.
Thank you. Councilor Baker.
I am confused. Your Worship, Scott, when you have a piece of land, you have the land value and you have the assessed value of the land. So that should go without saying. That piece of land is whatever the taxes are on that land. So we're using the word manufactured home. What is a manufactured home?
It's a mobile home or a trailer. Those individual single wide trailers
I worked for a company for 30 years, and they sold thousands of homes, and they called them Nelson Manufactured Homes. And all they are is a bunch of components nailed together. So what is the real difference? Whether you spike them together a mile west of town here, or and call them an RTM, or you build them in a component to ship them out and frame them on thing. What is the difference there? Like, I'm having trouble with the definition.
The ones we're referring to here would actually have a chassis. They could be towed from one location to the other. It's not considered, it's not what we would call a camper or a, trailer like that. It's the individual, typically they're 12 feet by 60 or 70 feet long. So if you win our trailer parks, that's what we're talking about. They have a chassis, they can be towed. Most times they're put there and they have skirting put around them. So they're a really low quality construction. They depreciate at a much greater rate than a typical residence would.
So the land shouldn't change.
The land won't change. The way trailer parks or mobile home parks are assessed is land is assessed individually as an income producing property. So it's not valued, it's valued based on its income support, because they rent each lot individually to trailers.
Okay, so from over a period of time, somebody moves a manufacturer in, somebody moves another one out, and they keep using recycling the land. So when they do that, they obviously have to apply for a permit to change facility, I would think.
Yeah.
So if you got a building that's assessed at $100,000 for one at $125,000, does that not deal with it? Like I don't really know what I'm trying to get at here, telling the truth. The fact that it's nailed together somewhere else shouldn't really change.
And that's not the focus. The focus is the different quality of buildings. And so the land that we're talking about, we have 3 mobile home parks in the city. They're designated by council as being mobile home parks, and that's what's allowed to be developed in there. So I think you're getting confused with a manufactured home that's a typical resident. Once it's put in place, it looks like a house, no different than any other house. These are just single wide trailers that are put in place that are meant to be lived in, not a typical summer camper.
So Councilor Baker, if I can add to this, City Clerk informed me that the charter does refer to manufactured home definition in section 228, subsection 1.
Subsection 1H.
1H. So it's actually defined in our charter as to what a manufactured home is. And I can appreciate what you're saying. It comes down to terminology, but it's a mobile home is the best description I would give someone when we talk about these designated manufactured homes. A mobile home, a home that can be lived in and hooked to the utilities of the day, as trailers can be mobile trailers, but this is truly one it would be defined as the mobile home in that case. So I hope that adds a little clarity.
If I could, because nothing is ever as clear as it should be. 228.1 H, T, and U define a mobile home, a manufactured home, a mobile home, and a modular home. So the definitions are held within the charter on exactly what we look at in those properties.
Okay.
I know it's not as clear as we'd like it to be, as you say, because of terminologies in the past, and people might refer to.
We'll see more on that, I'm sure, before we're done here. Thank you.
George? No.
I mean, the system is just, you're just streamlining it, so it's going to be easier as far as the municipality goes, and the landowner will collect it from each of the individual trailer owners or mobile homeowners. So it just simplifies everything, basically.
And instead of those owners having to remit to us on a monthly basis, they would just pay the same as everyone else through part of the property tax payments.
Councilor.
Thank you, Your Worship. My concern with this is that we're passing on collection risk from ourselves onto the owner of the mobile home lot. And I'm wondering whether or not that's fair.
That's currently the structure we have in place now as well, but it's fees.
That is, just with the fees, we're talking about property tax on top of that.
No, the fees will go away. The $2 a day fee will be
And now-
replaced by.
Okay, so it's just, it's the same thing, but literally a changing of the verbiage to call it a minimum tax rather than a fee.
Yeah, so we're getting, the fees are no longer allowed, it's just, we couldn't continue to do it because we're a charter. So I didn't want to continue on with a fee structure, and then in a couple of years, we redo the charter, and we have to take on the current MGA rules, and then we wouldn't be allowed to be back doing the same thing again.
Perfect. So now to make sure I'm on the same page, because I've gone in a pretty big circle here. This is literally the same structure that we already have, but we're changing the name of it from a fee to a minimum tax.
Yes, that's pretty well correct.
All right. I'm good with that.
I think that,
Just as a note, Your Worship, just as a note to, the minimum tax would include the school tax. So we have to pay a portion of the fees currently now as part of school tax, and there's a formula for calculating that. So that $2, we don't get all that $2, a portion of that goes to the schools. So any minimum fee we charge, we're gonna have to calculate the school tax portion.
Thank you, Your Worship. So now my question is the school tax based on the assessed value that we're now going to determine what the assessed value is?
It'll be based on, yes,
Or is it coming out like a proportion? So let's say there's 2/3 of fees levied are city, 1/3 is municipal. So we take this $2 and divide it by 3. The city gets 2 portions, the schools get 1 portion.
yeah, that's currently how it's being done now, and that will continue if it's the minimum tax. If their assessments are high enough to be charged a mill rate, then we would do it based on the mills. But if it's a minimum, whatever the minimum tax that's set by
Because-
council.
Just to be, sorry,
Yeah,
I'm not trying to interrupt you, but on the way a minimum tax works is if it is over the minimum tax, the assessed value,
Yes,
then they pay the full amount
Exactly.
based on the assessed value.
Yeah.
But the minimum just sets a floor.
yes.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilor Baker, you can see you thinking over there.
But there's a minimum tax on any municipality. Every municipality's got a minimum tax on empty land. That I know lots of them. That have a minimum tax on empty lots. As soon as you put a home on them, the land value skyrockets and your land taxes go up. You don't stay at a minimum tax.
We currently
It's a
do not
minimum
have-
tax when the lot is empty. Lots of resorts, communities do it, and they do it all over the place. So what we're saying is, if we have a lot, say it was minimum tax is $400, and you bring in a ready to move home, or mobile home, or manufactured home, whatever you want to call it, set it on there, then what happens to the land value? Anything?
The land value would become improved property. So the land, once the structure put on the land, it became, instead of being vacant, it's improved property.
But the building wouldn't.
The building would add
Building's
value.
assessed separately.
The building, well, it would be one assessment, it would show you what the land value is, the building value, and then a total assessment. But we do not have a minimum tax of any kind in the city right now.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're clear in that, Councilor Baker, there is a minimum tax today in the city of Westminster. So a piece of bare property would be taxed at a value, but at the value that it was assessed at for that bare property is commercial or residential.
But who pays the difference? In January, I pay my taxes, I own the trailer court. And minimum tax $400, pick a number. You move one in a house in February, and the land value goes up, and the price of taxes go up. What happens to those, that increase?
Scott, for that, sir.
I'm not quite sure what he's asking, to be honest.
We will let you work that one out.
Councilor,
I want to see if this is the right track. So the land value is all on its own. So let's say you have 3 side by side, they're all $30,000 lots, let's say. So the assessed value of the land is done separately. So now we're talking about just the trailer on it. You have a $30,000 trailer, a $50,000 trailer, a $70,000 trailer. And let's say the one in the middle, the 50,000, I don't remember what the middle was. Anyway, the middle one works out to your $2 a day. So the $30,000 one pays the same price as the middle one, but the $75,000 one pays more because it's over that floor.
That's correct. And the land,
I think that a presentation, just to go with this, could be handy, not only for ourselves, but maybe for the public to understand. Because it is, I know it's common in other municipalities, but it's brand new here, even though it's been around for.
Yeah. And the entire parcel of land is assessed as one as well. So if he's got 20 acres of land, it's assessed as one 20-acre vacant lot. But it's valued on the income approach to value because it's an income-producing parcel of land. So we do that individually. Each mobile home will be assessed as being just a building value. There'll be no land value to those properties.
I get that, Scott, and I'm just going to go back to Councilor Baker's question a little bit then. So if it has the ability to bear income, the landowner would argue that it isn't, but if there's a mobile home on it, the assessor would argue it is because you have revenue. How do we deal with mobile homes that do move? Because that's one of the issues that could come up. Is that a supplemental assessment done whenever?
Yes, we would, as one moved in, one moved out, we would just replace the building data and assess the value.
Do they need a permit from the city to do that?
I would think they would need a development permit, but they don't need an actual permit to move in, but I think they would need a development from planning for sure.
A very interesting subject. I never expected it. It sparked this kind of interest.
We would like to bring this forward to the next council meeting, so is there anything in addition that you would like to see?
Councilor Dorsey?
This one has to be, just to give you some, this has to be approved in this year in order for it to take effect for January 2020.
Sure. I think what I was just describing of the three properties, one that works out to even, one that's less, and one that's above, I think just makes it pretty clear as to what we're looking at. So just pick a random number that works out to roughly the amount you think it's going to be, and I think it makes more sense. And the other thing is that I really didn't understand the first time we were doing this is it's the same thing. We're merely changing the name of it to follow the charter closely.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
closer.
The under the current mill rate, we would have to have a value of $72,400 to get above $700 minimum.
And that includes the lot, or that's done separate? Or like
The lot is
land?
separate
Okay.
altogether. Because the lot was paid for through the property tax program now, the mobile homes are paid through a fee structure. So we're trying to bring it all together and make it one.
So here's your example for the presentation, $50,000 trailer, that number you just said, and a $90,000 trailer, and what the three tax amounts will be, well, two tax amounts.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you, Scott.
No problem.
Okay, so it's up to the next one. 6.2.
The subject matter for this one is information report is Assessment Review Board Appeal Fees Bylaw. Administration is bringing forward a new bylaw to update and replace bylaw number 02-2006. The City of Lloydminster currently has a bylaw outlining Assessment Review Board Appeal fees governing only non-residential properties. Bylaw 02-2006 was passed February 20th, 2006, and has received no updates since passing. The maximum fee allowed to be set by council for each property class are outlined in the table below for matters relating to assessment complaint regulations, or MREC AR 310-2009. If the Assessment Review Board or the Municipal Government Board makes the decision in favor of the property owner, the fees will be refunded. So this table here just shows the categories, it shows the legislated amounts, shows what we currently charge and what we're proposing. So for instance, residential 3 or fewer or farmland, legislatively we can charge up to $50. We currently don't charge anything, and we're proposing $50 fees. Just a breakdown there of each one. Administration has developed new fees based on the above maximum fees, as well as comparisons conducted between Alberta and Saskatchewan municipalities. Our objective is to update and replace the existing bylaw with new fees in alignment with Alberta and Saskatchewan municipalities. Government's administration would like to bring this forward to the November 26th council meeting for first reading, and budget assessment review board costs are budgeted annually. I'll pass back to you, Worship.
Thank you, Scott. Comments? Questions? So as Scott noted on the last page in the report, we're not the only community that has a fee or proposing a fee. There's fees already in existence in some places. And again, to really let people know this is not, if they do go to review, appeal, and they do win, they get the money back. It's simply a portion of a fee for the service, because the review process, as Councillor Fagan and I have sat through some of the training, the assessment review board is a fairly lengthy process. So there's some cost to that the city incurs, but we also believe that there should be some costs that are incurred by the people that are requesting the appeal.
The main purpose to having those type of fees in place is, we hope that people would contact us before they put in a formal complaint or appeal, and we can go through that process. So typically, if people are putting in a formal complaint, there should be legitimate reasons for that.
Councillor Baker on the first.
Your Worship, I was just going to say that this particular bylaw has to be fair and reasonable, no question. But I remember when this was introduced to the city for the first time, what was happening, mortgage companies are preparing all kinds of mortgages in the city, but automatically appeal every tax notice that was sent out to the city. And I'm sure a city clerk could go back in the records and find where there was 50, 75, 100 appeals from one mortgage broker. So all you did all year was review appeal, So the decision was made, there's a fee, and if you're right, there was a mistake, you got your money back. But if you didn't, the city kept the money. I tell you, it got rid of a whole bunch of petty little appeals. In some cases, I witnessed where the mortgage company didn't even know what the taxes were. They just handed the box to somebody and said, go and appeal these. That's how it was out of track a little bit. So it's definitely the right thing to do. I just hope that our fees are very competitive, that's all.
Yeah, and I gave you guys a list there on the end of what current, there's some gaps there that don't show the numbers, but I can tell you what those are. I've got no sense. So if you've got any questions on what the costs are for other municipalities that's currently showing a blank, I can kind of fill those in for you.
If you wouldn't mind, if you've got Scott, we can just as a report.
Regina currently doesn't show anything in the block for farmlands. They currently charge the $30, same as residential. Saskatoon, they base all their costs on assessment values. Swift Current, farmlands, the same as residential, and they do it based on up to $499,999 is $150, between $500,000 and $1 million is $500, and over $1 million is $750. Yorkton does a similar type thing. Airdrie, again, it goes by assessed values. It's the same type of system, $500,000, so it goes up from there. Brooks Alberta is a bit different. They do a base price of $50, and then they charge $10 per unit, up to a maximum of $150. And then for their non-residential, it's up to $650. Camrose, the only one missing there is non-residential. They charge $250. Edmonds all filling. Grand Prairie, they charge $650 for non-residential, which is the maximum allowed under legislation. Leduc does the same type of things. $499,999 down is $300. Anything above that is $650. Residential is $50. Lethbridge is $650 for non-residential, $50 for farmland. Medicine Hat, they have a $30 fee for vacant land. They have a $100 fee for anything under $500,000. Some of these fees I would question because they're if it's a residential property under $500,000, they're charging $100. Legislation says they're going to charge $50, so that's their issues, not ours. $500,000 and up is $200. Up to $10 million is $300. Greater than $10 million is $500. And St. Albert does the same thing. Under $1 million is $250. $1 million to $5 million is $500, and over $5 million is $650. So most municipalities are hovering around the maximums. We're not asking council to go that high. We're going maximum on the residential, 200 on 4 more properties, and anywhere from 200 to 600 depending on the assessed values for non-residential. We don't have anything for business taxes. We don't have a business tax. Tax notices, we can charge $30. We're not recommending anything because usually tax notice is an administrative error that we can correct it and have to go to courts. The last three to do with linear properties are under the jurisdiction of the province. So we don't have any control over those properties.
Thank you, Scott. Councilor Torres.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I definitely understand like the purpose behind why you would charge these fees, because you only you'd like to kind of cycle through legitimate complaints from non-legitimate ones, and I think just having some level of fee kind of helps cipher those out. The same way as if you're having a free event, you make someone buy a ticket and you can reimburse them later, something along those lines. That's a terrible example, but I know there's something similar people do, so that they actually, you know, make the effort to go. So I think that it's a good thing that we get some level of fee, and it looks like our numbers, as far as I can see, aren't too far, or right in the right zone for what everyone else is doing. My curiosity is whether or not, so our current ones, those were all administered by KSL, is that what they're going?
KCL. They will be administered through our program here in the city, because we will be the ones collecting the complaint period.
Okay, but in the past they've been administered and collected by KCL? As
We collect the fees, they will do the inquiry and
okay.
check, make sure the properties are assessed properly.
Perfect. Oh, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah, and this is more of, we want people to come and approach us first so we can review their files. And this is actually going to make it easier for the property owner, because once they put in a formal complaint, there's legislative things we have to do. They have to send in disclosure, and everything is done formally. The other way, we can have a conversation and go through the property.
That's the other thing that I thought was important about your statement was that you're hoping that people call in and kind of inquire before a formal complaint is issued, especially because I think our costs increase quite a bit on the issue if we end up having to actually do an investigation into an individual property. But this actually incentivizes that phone call to happen, so that we do things on the cheaper end from the city's perspective, and doesn't necessarily waste the time from an individual if you find out that no, there's nothing wrong, we took a quick look at it and it appears everything that should be there is there, and that kind of thing. So yeah, it makes sense as far as I can see.
Any other comments? Well, thank you, Scott. I think that, again, as Councilor Torres put it very well. We really want to encourage people, if they have an inquiry about their assessment, to start the process without filing a formal grievance complaint, because once that's started, it changes the whole dynamics. But getting people involved in dialogue and discussion so that they have the opportunity to reach the taxation department in the city to get some information so they can better understand how the assessment was arrived at. And there'll be more going forward, because as we move forward to the city taking over the assessment process, that will change dramatically with in-house assessors here at the city, and people will be able to pick up the phone and have a much better conversation, I believe, and sometimes reaching out to a contractor from that perspective. So.
What's up? Thank you.
Moving to agenda item number 6.3, the city manager.
Thank you, Your Worship, to present the draft sponsorship and advertising policy. I'll call Joel Turcotte forward.
Good morning.
Good afternoon, Joel. Good morning, you're right. Myself here.
The sponsorship and advertising policy, the last one was approved in March 2015. Administration reviewed the document and had some gaps that we found. Sponsorship and advertising related to tobacco and cannabis was not in the current sponsorship. We updated the approvals for sponsorship to match the city's purchasing policy, and gift in kind sponsorships were also not in the last purchasing policy. The updated policy provides a framework for administration and includes updated guidelines on pricing approvals, gift in kind sponsorship, and allocations of sponsorship funds. Administration has drafted a new sponsorship and advertising policy that forms the principles and conditions under which the city will pursue and enter into sponsorship and advertising agreements, and set out responsibilities and delegated authorities to ensure consistency. Objection of the sponsorship is to provide a means of generating revenue at market value, enabling the city to benefit with the delivery of program services, facility enhancement, and operational budgets while balancing the social benefits to the city, community, and corporate sponsors. So obviously there's some options there, but I'm looking for discussion and direction.
Questions, comments for Joel? Joel, I believe I've got one around 538. No, sorry, no, it's not 538. I'm just gonna find my notes. Bear with me a second. Okay, I knew I changed the paper for a reason I shouldn't have. It was regarding who determines the value. So, okay, 6-1, I guess, from a pricing perspective, how will, let's see, to me it's a little vague. How do we, because you've got people selling something to the city and saying it's worth this much, but certainly it's going to put somebody in a position, either yourself or whoever's in that position, saying, well, I don't think it's worth that much. How, is there any way we can get something a little clearer around that?
Yeah, so the city, in 2016 did have some market values created by a third party, and we do evaluate those. It's not something that we can just use all the time. Economies change, what you can sell changes, but it's something that we take into account. So it's something that we discuss lots, but it's hard to just say this is worth this and that's it. At the end of the day, we still want to generate revenue.
And this is a policy, it's not an actual bylaw, so it's a guiding document rather than the law.
Absolutely.
That's the important thing to remember as well. Any other comments or questions? Councillor Torch?
To be honest with you, I thought it was a pretty good all-around policy. Like generally you may find something that you have some real comment that you're confused about something. This one I have no confusion at all. I think we're pretty well. I don't know, it's a good looking policy. I can't think of anything when I read it that stuck out like a sore thumb, needs adjustment or anything. It looks good. At least ready for the big show. Regular council.
Any other thoughts or comments from any other members of council? Well, thank you, Joel, for bringing that forward, certainly capturing the tobacco and cannabis side of things, because things are changing in our community regularly, sometimes at a federal and provincial level. It leads to changes at the municipal level, so thank you for bringing that forward. Last call, all good? Thank you very much, Joel.
Thank you.
We're a little bit ahead of schedule, not much, but Councilor Baker.
Excuse me, just one point. Under sponsorship and advertising related to tobacco and cannabis, is there anything else that should be under that list, like alcohol or anything like that? Just a question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Sorry, I was walking away and never heard the question.
Just at the beginning under the backgrounder, it said sponsorship and advertising related to tobacco and or cannabis. You know, there was some conditions there. And I just wondered if it should say and alcohol. Like, it goes without saying, but at the same time, it's not something we would probably be directly involved in any more than tobacco or cannabis.
We discussed alcohol lots. It's a hard one because of how many events we have. We have adult events, we have youth events, obviously. So we never mention alcohol because depending on the event, we may or may want to advertise. There's no legislation about, unlike tobacco, there's no legislation that says when they can advertise in what kind of facilities. In tobacco there is. So
that's a good point, because most socials do have alcohol related, a bar attached to it, so good point. Thank you.
Indeed. because that is by provincial legislation. And we know that in our city, there's different regulations on both sides of the border, so it plays into it, but appreciate the response to all that and covers it off well. Thank you. Okay. So I'll look to council for direction. We're just before the lunch hour. If we'd like to take a recess, if council so wishes, I entertain a motion to recess, and then we'll reconvene at 1:30 for the third party. Ask Council Buckingham, seconded by Council Fagin. Any discussion? Not seeing any. I'll call for question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Recess till 1:30.